Good afternoon, and welcome to the first webcast in our series on equity and engagement in the remote classroom. I'm Emily Magruder, Director of the Institute for Teaching and Learning in the CSU Office of the Chancellor. As we resume teaching in a remote environment this fall, how do we create virtual environments in which first-year students can become self-confident learners, comfortably interacting with students, faculty, and staff in and out of the classroom? How can we conduct instruction so that students make connections with each other and with instructors and other professionals in the university community? How do we reimagine what learning looks and feels like in this new modality while leveraging the affordances of academic technology and synchronous and asynchronous activities to engage students more equitably than ever? These are the kind of questions that the presenters in this series will try to answer for you. One quick piece of business before we get started today: if you'd like to be added to the mailing list for this series, the link to the mailing list registration form is in the chat, and I'll add it a couple of more times today before we finish. Launching our series today are two faculty from CSU Channel Islands who will lead us through an asset-based icebreaker that asks students to share the strengths and skills they're bringing to a course without inadvertently exposing class, race, ability, and other divides. Lorna, I'm going to stop my share and hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, Emily. And thank you to all of you for coming, as well as for introducing yourselves in the chat with your name, your CSU site, and a skill that you've practiced recently. So again, my name is Lorna Gonzalez. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Interim Assistant Director of Innovation and Faculty Development at California State University, Channel Islands. And I'm so proud to be joined today by my esteemed colleague, English Program faculty member and Learning Design faculty lead, Rachel Jordan. I'm going to actually switch over to our agenda for today so that you can see it. Okay, so there are several great and fun ideas for first week icebreakers over Zoom or housed within an LMS. And when done thoughtfully, these can be initial ways to welcome students, build community, and make way for establishing a sense of belonging. For today's 30-minute webcast, which is already underway, we want to share one simple icebreaker that anyone can do with minimal setup or technology, with various adaptations for class size or modality, and most importantly, with thoughtful, equity-minded consideration to what and how we ask students to share about themselves early in the term. Rachel will unpack that a little bit more in a minute. This webcast is about icebreakers, so we're actually going to begin with an icebreaker, and then after the icebreaker experience, we will regroup to debrief the technique, approach, adaptations, and underlying philosophy. So now I'm actually going to hand it over to Rachel.
Thank you, Lorna. Hi, everyone, and thank you for being here. So this icebreaker that we're going to do, I'm actually calling it a mini icebreaker due to our 30-minute webcast. So Lorna, if you want to pull up that mini icebreaker, that would be great. So first of all, I adapted the question we're going to be talking about for this webcast from two educators named Ken Shelton and Max Highfield. So what we'll be doing first is we'll be putting you into breakout rooms with probably two other people who are part of the webcast. And I want you to discuss the following question with each other for about 5 minutes. So make sure to introduce your name and the school site you are at. And remember to share the time equitably. 5 minutes can actually fly by. So make sure everyone gets a chance to talk. But what we're hoping you discuss, and that we've already had you thinking a little bit about, is did you learn any new skill sets, enhance any existing skill sets, or gain any additional understanding of something, including yourself, over the summer that we can all benefit from who are gathered here today? So again, what's going to happen is Emily will be placing everyone into breakout rooms. We will send you a 1-minute wrap-up warning as we start our timer on our end. Also, Lorna has put this question in the chat. so you can pull up the question in your breakout rooms. So if everyone is ready to go, then happy talking. And Emily, feel free to place everyone in their breakout rooms.
Thank you, Rachel and Lorna. So let me I don't know how many of you experienced breakout rooms before. I'm going to randomly assign you to a breakout room, and our facilitators will not be joining. If you find that you end up in a breakout room by yourself, send us a message and we'll get that fixed. We don't want that to happen. We want everybody to have a partner, but communicate with us by chat or just come back into the main room and we'll get you situated. All right, here we go.
I see people slowly trickling in from the breakout sessions. So welcome back. I'm going to give us a minute to get everyone back and gathered in the main room. If you want to, you can begin thinking about what you learned from discussing this question with the people in your breakout sessions, and I'll tell you what we're going to do with that as soon as everyone is back. All right, so welcome back from your breakout rooms, everyone. One thing I want to do to sort of debrief from that breakout session is, if you could, please share something in the chat that you learned about yourself or a colleague through doing this breakout session. As you're thinking about that and typing that, in a synchronous class with my students, I would actually ask for volunteers to speak to the whole group. But since we are a group of about 90, we're going to keep it to the chat. But what this also is doing is modeling multiple means of engagement. Some students maybe are only comfortable talking in small groups and wouldn't be comfortable sharing out loud or on video with the full class, but would be comfortable sharing in the chat. So if you all could just take a minute, what I'm starting to see come through the chat is that everyone got time to actually talk in the small group setting. You're talking about how you've been doing collaborative activities in breakout sessions, that you've learned, most of us are learning this summer that setting up online courses definitely increases our workload and takes a lot more time on the front end. It seems like other people are learning about new tools for communication or teaching. We're looking at across the CSUs what different teaching and, well, we call it teaching and learning innovations, but your different technology departments and offices and programs are offering. So this is really great. As you can see, with a group this big, the chat is moving very quickly. So that's something to keep in mind when thinking about your own class size and what you'll be doing. So because of the constraints of this webinar, we did this icebreaker very quickly. This is something that I would definitely have scaffolded a lot more if I was setting this up for a synchronous online class. So for example, I would maybe have students do something like actually answer this question in a discussion board in our LMS before coming to the synchronous session, or even, and we have an example of this in our resources on our Google site, I would even set up a Google slide deck and have each student make a slide answering this question and introducing themselves. So there are lots of different ways to run this synchronously. And before I get to the asynchronous example that we want to show you, I want to talk a little bit about why this question, right? So one reason is that, first of all, this question is very adaptable. So if you wanted to take this question and make it related to your specific content, you could, right? But we gave you the general one because I think it's a wonderful example of asking students to build on what they're already bringing into the classroom. So again, even though we didn't use the word asset and we didn't use the word strength, what we're actually asking students to do is talk about what they're bringing into the room. What this does is it gives them the opportunity to connect to their own lives and their own knowledge immediately in the first week of class. What this does too is the exercise helps show students how we're building knowledge collectively as a class, and everyone has something to contribute. I also think it's a great way to kind of set up this community of of inquiry, right? Of we're gonna ask questions and apply it to our lives and share with each other. And so it starts our class off on that foot. Lastly, I think it's a wonderful question because it lets us amplify our students' voices and it gives them agency, right? It gives them a chance to think about what they already know and what they can offer to other students in the class and share and build knowledge together. So yes, so with that, I think is one reason why this question spoke so much to me. And again, if you wanted to adapt it to your content or to a theme in the course, I think it's one that you can easily do that with. The other thing I like about this is we're going to show you, and Lorna, you can move over to it now. We're going to show you an example of running this icebreaker asynchronously through a Google slide deck, but you can take this activity and you can drop it into VoiceThread, or you can do this on a discussion board, or you can use any other type of tool that you would like to use that you're comfortable with. But for our example, Google Slide Deck is an easy thing to collaborate on. So you'll see we have a pretty basic just introduction slide here. So on the next slide, we give students an overview of the icebreaker. What I like to do for all of my activities and assignments in my classes, in my online classes especially, is be really explicit about my purpose. Why are we doing what we're doing? So here I'm telling them that this is to help us start building community and get to know one another. So on the next slide, I give explicit directions for what to do in this Google slide deck. And by the way, we do have this slide deck available for you to download and copy if you want to borrow it or use it. So the directions that I give students is the first thing they need to do is pick one blank slide. I've set up enough slides for the whole class. And they need to put their name and major in the speaker notes and then answer the same question I just gave all of you. And I give them options, right? So one, I'm sure many of you have maybe been learning about Universal Design for Learning this summer or over the past couple years. So giving students choice of using text or images or video or audio to express themselves is always great, giving that choice. And since we're not using this icebreaker to assess something specific like writing, I give the students choice for how to fill out the slide. So they'll introduce themselves and answer the question on the slide and then come back and comment. I've also given explicit instructions for how to comment and what to ask or answer in those comments. So that way we stay away from students just going, hey, cool, or sounds great, and they're actually engaging in discussion. So Lorna, if you could go to the next slide. We've also just embedded a quick little video that shows students how to leave comments. So that way it's built right in and they're not emailing us asking how. We have those instructions right there. So then what Lorna and I did is we each put an example slide up. So you'll see I talked a little bit about this summer. I decided to keep track of the books that I'm reading. I wanted to make sure that I was reading a diverse range of authors, and I put some of the books I read this summer on here. Also a picture reading to my son, and a fun little tidbit about learning how to play Animal Crossing New Horizons with my older son. And as you can see on the side, Lorna and I started having a conversation about some of these things as we commented back and forth to one another. And then the same thing happened on Lorna's slide, where she posted too about learning about being a working mom remotely, about looking at dismantling structural inequities in the subjects that she teaches. And she too added kind of a fun one about Bitmoji. And in our discussion on the side, we ended up giving each other resources and chatting about those similarities. So this was the example of Lorna and I doing this, but this is very similar to what students end up doing as well. Another reason I like to use this is because I use Google Slides later in the course. So this is a low stakes way of getting students to practice this before I'm asking them to use it for larger, more summative assessments. So yes, I know that was very fast, but we have all of this available on our resources, and I'm going to turn it back over to Lorna.
Right, okay, and here we are on our agenda. So I just want to tell you, I did put a link, and thank you also, Emily, for putting the link to our sort of ancillary materials for this webcast it's in the chat. And in addition to our agenda for today, we've included Rachel's templates and including the instructions that she gives to students when she uses this asynchronously in her online course. So you can click to receive your own copy, as well as the Google slide decks that have our examples. So you also have options to save your own copy there. And then we also, because this was just one icebreaker of many, we curated a short list of resources about icebreakers held in Zoom and also asynchronously, and a couple on asset building and equity. So at this point, I will stop sharing my screen. And this is the part of the webcast where we have just a few minutes for questions and answers.
So I already see a question from Sean Anderson in the chat. And yes, all summer our discussions have been about these tools and differing class sizes. Obviously, you'll see from my example, I teach first year writing, which means my course caps are very small. And I know many of you, especially in STEM education, are working with very large class sizes. So a couple quick suggestions that I have is adapting things like this to one thing I've seen an environmental science and resource management professor do at CI is she actually creates discussion groups for the semester. She calls them pods. So when they're working on a discussion board, they're actually working in smaller groups of maybe 15 rather than all 80. So they would do an icebreaker like this within their discussion pod to get to know each other. And one thing I try to remember is, obviously with a class that large, we wouldn't be doing this type of thing even on the first day in a face-to-face course. So I think breaking into smaller groups, whether that's through breakout sessions in Zoom or on discussion boards, is a great way to handle that. And then of course, for feedback for something like this, for the icebreaker, again, since it's not a summative assessment, it's not even necessarily formative in that I need to give students feedback for how to improve next time. I'm really just checking off more holistically. Were they there and engaged with this activity? If they were, then amazing, right? It's very low stakes, just first week getting to know each other. So Sean, I hope that answered your question. I know large class sizes are definitely a challenge, especially when looking at humanizing online teaching and doing activities like this. Thank you.
I can pop in a little bit on that as well. And just add that my adaptation for this icebreaker on the first day will actually be content area focused. And so it will go similar to how this session began today. I'm going to have an artifact from our discipline up on screen. And then I'm going to ask students to think about what questions they have about the artifact and what people in our discipline or practitioners, what kinds of questions they might ask about this artifact. And then I'll be dividing them into groups. In Zoom, it's really quick, and Emily just did it. You can put people in random groups as large or as small as you like. We keep them small, and they will introduce themselves and just discuss the questions that they had about the artifact. So it's an into to the course a little bit.
And Jennifer's asking in the chat, and Dr. Kim Vos has given some good advice there about how do we know people are talking in breakout rooms. When it's my own class, I actually pop into each breakout room just very quickly to see if students are on track and talking. And I'm also this semester, with everything going on right now, I'm trying to do all of this from a place of trust with my students. So that's a big thing for me. I'm trusting that they are there and they're showing up, and if they want to get something out of the class, they'll be engaging where and when they can. So, and I think too that getting used to the Zoom environment is just going to take students some time. And that's why I think offering options like post in the chat or talk to the whole group sometimes gets more students involved who aren't maybe comfortable talking to the whole group live on Zoom. Especially, you never know if they're, kids are running around in the background, or my cat, I had to put my cat in another room because she would have just sat here and meowed the whole time I was presenting. So they're dealing with different stuff. So I hope that answered your question, Jennifer. And
I can add also that somebody earlier had a suggestion that you could use Google Docs where everyone's contributing to that, and if you use Google Slides, then you, the instructor, can look at the gallery view and see the work that's happening in the different rooms and kind of gauge whether people are contributing or not if you are wanting to monitor in that way.
All right, it is time for us to bring this discussion to a close today. I'm going to borrow a comment that Teresa Garcia contributed in the chat to turn that into my thank you to Rachel and Lorna for this quick but very helpful, informative, and awesome presentation. That's what we were aiming for with this series: quick, helpful, informative, and awesome. The webcast recording will be posted on the ITL website for viewing, along with resources that Rachel and Lorna have generously shared during the webcast. We'll send the link out to you all early next week when it's available, and we hope you'll join us again next Friday at 1 p.m. Our presenter will be Marla Parker, a professor in the Masters in Public Administration program at Cal State Los Angeles, and the topic will be community classroom agreements, how to co-create them and use them to create an equitable learning environment. And finally, Claudia, I don't know if you can help me here. For anybody who missed the link to register for our mailing list for this series, if you would put that into the chat, then we can try to get one message to everyone who wants to join this series without sending it through multiple channels. Let me close by saying have a great weekend, and we wish you great success as you greet students and set them on the path to attaining their goals this fall.